All right, folks, it's Steve with Real Progressives. I'm going to be bringing on my friend, Victor Tiffany, in just a moment. I shouldn't just say my friend. I should say my partner in crime now, my partner in revolution, my very, very established, very, very decorated partner, Victor Tiffany. So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring on Victor. Victor, how are you, sir?
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. I think it's the first time I've ever been referred to as established.
Dude, you are established, not establishment, not to be confused for establishment, but you have laid tracks for a very, very long time. And I got to tell you, going back to the DNC and seeing you marshal the troops calm, cool, and collected, and leading the charge with the Bernie or Bust pledge, I was in awe of you, man. You really, really set the bar for taking it to the establishment, for real. And, you and I have flirted with finding out how two old white guys that are married and have careers and stuff could find a way to work together so that we could leverage our skills and our interests to bring about radical change. And I think we finally figured it out, man. So I'm really excited for us to be working together. Real quickly, for those of you who are just joining us, Revolt Against Plutocracy will now become the activism wing of Real Progressives. We will be working together in unison to create radical change. We've been working for some time on pulling this off. And today we finally decided to come out of the closet and tell everybody what's going on. So with that, Victor, what do you think, man? Are you excited? What does the future hold? What are some of our plans? And tell us a little bit about CFAR.
Sure. It is pretty exciting. It's very exciting. First of all, because this moment has been months in coming. We've been planning this merger. We, on our committee, went back and forth and discussed it. And it was a process we had to go through to make sure this is going to be a good marriage. I could see it was good because I knew what everything Real Progressives was bringing to the table. And it was part of my process. Part of my job was to convey how not only was this going to benefit Revolt Against Plutocracy and our new strategy, the follow-up to Bernie or Bust, we're calling CFAR or else, but we absolutely need the structures and capabilities of Real Progressives if we're going to have any chance whatsoever to make this upcoming election not a blue wave election, because any blue won't do. I have to repeat that. Any blue will not do. We need populists, left populists, people willing to go to Congress and do what the people want them to do. Isn't that in itself is a radical idea, that the people in Congress would actually represent the will of the people. And so CFAR else is a new strategy that basically it's Bernie or Bust, but we're replacing Bernie with something called the Contract for American Renewal. This is a transpartisan strategy, right? Democrats can sign the Contract for American Renewal. We have 3 Greens. We have 2 independents. We now have 4 or 5 candidates for U.S. Senate who have signed this contract. So it's some very serious people. We have an incumbent, Representative Ro Khanna, signed the Contract for American Renewal. So it's something that's underway, but we're going to need more than just recruiting candidates and asking people to sign a pledge, a voter pledge, to only support candidates who sign this contract. This is basically a continuation, the whole idea of what we did with Bernie or Bust. We asked people to sign a pledge, a voter pledge, to only support either Bernie Sanders or, once we figured out what a bad idea write-in is all across the country, we added the option of or vote Green, the Green Party candidate, who of course was Jill Stein. So this time around, it's going to be, we're only going to support candidates willing to sign this contract, because as far as we're concerned, if you can't CFAR, you might be a neoliberal. And this is a revolutionary war against neoliberals. Let's make that very clear. This is a civil war. I want to make that clear to the NSA, who no doubt is listening in. We're not calling for violence in any way, but we will work to make sure that Democrats who refuse to sign this contract, this populist contract, won't win their election. And in my congressional district, we have a lot of tension around this strategy. Our candidates who they're winning straw polls, they're winning endorsement of so-called progressives here in town, but none of these people are getting these endorsements and winning these straw polls have signed the contract for American Renewal. And the one guy who did sign this contract, he's a union leader, he's a school teacher, he's a genuine progressive. He strong supporter of Bernie Sanders when he was running for president. Rick Gallant, he signed this contract, and people, even progressives, aren't giving him much consideration, which is really strange because for a variety of reasons, it's just very strange. So there's a lot of tension around this idea of, screw you guys, we're not going to support the Democratic Party victor of the primary this year unless that victor ends up signing the contract, or that victor is the person who has signed the contract. That's the leverage. And a lot of people don't understand this. A lot of people think we're Republicans, which, we heard that line back when we were doing Bernie or Bust. This is a plot from the Koch brothers. This is a Karl Rove plot. I saw that so many times. We ended up creating this standard response. We asked all of our volunteers to copy and paste. Anytime anybody accuses you of being a Republican here, just give them this. And basically, it was an attack framing an opposition, a progressive opposition to neoliberalism.
So, Victor, what I want to ask you here is, for those of you all who have followed Real Progressives for the last 3 years, you know that we've been building something we call the 4 pillars, and we have 7 knowledge areas. And of the 4 pillars, we have the policy pillar, which will be a think tank in the end. It'll be most likely a 501c3, so it'll be an arm's distance from Victor's group, which is a super PAC. And then you have our education pillar that will most likely be a nonprofit as well, focused on how do we enable this entire progressive revolution, this entire progressive agenda, and all the policy prescriptions that save lives. And then you have the activism pillar, which is the direct action, the sustained campaigns, the ability to take pressure to the streets, to the media, to town halls, wherever, all throughout America, to really, really, really flood the streets with action, but is direct, absolutely sustained action, campaign-driven action, not these, energy sapping one-off protests, but real legitimate sustained campaigns like CFAR, for example. And this is but one campaign that we will do over the course of our hopefully long and illustrious marriage. But then the last and final one is our media pillar, which will most likely be either an LLC, or we may go the route of Democracy Now! And turn it into a nonprofit as well. And then we're hoping to build a management group, an umbrella, that will have a program and project management office that will enable connectivity and run projects and run these big initiatives from a planning and control standpoint to be able to make sure everybody gets their I's dotted, their T's crossed, and make sure we deliver 100% value to the people that support us. So, Victor, you guys are a huge part of this because everyone loves activism. Everyone loves taking part in campaigns, both supporting the candidates they'd like to see, the issues they'd like to see. But more importantly, and this is what made this relationship, in my opinion, from our team's perspective, really, really solidify. And that is the fact that over the course of our friendship and our relationship, you went from being someone who had a very different economic viewpoint to someone that learned modern monetary theory to a degree that you were able to present in an incredibly coherent, sharp, well-done play to the Movement for a People's Party national organizing call. And I sat there with goosebumps and my hair standing on end as you spoke. I never more proud to be a partner with somebody than the night that you presented that. I was beaming with pride, dude. It was an incredible opportunity. You took it. Your team made this happen. I know Kelly worked tirelessly behind the scenes to get Movement for a People's Party ready to hear this. And then you went and delivered the final blow, and they approved it in a landslide. It was a wonderful thing to be a part of, quite frankly. And I want to applaud you. And I also want to tell you what a wonderful leader you are. And I think that this is going to do well for our larger organization and all the goals and initiatives we have now that we have a coherent economic strategy that traverses all four pillars. Tell us a little bit about your time at the Movement for a People's Party National Organizing Call, and a little bit about what you said and the feeling of victory there.
Well, let me first say, Steve, kudos to you. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to articulate that understanding of modern monetary theory if it hadn't been for your interviews that I try to catch on Sunday nights with the experts, and your explanations, even going back to 2016 when you were defending Jill Stein's policy plank to pay off student loans, which of course has become a very popular thing because the group studied that. But back to the conference call, of course, we had endorsed draft burning in 2017 and got behind that. And in the process, I lost my Facebook page with 30,000 followers at 33,000 followers because the co-administrator to that page I allowed to serve as an administrator decided he didn't like Bernie Sanders anymore. He didn't want us to participate in draft Bernie. So in order to get even, he took my page from me, which was rather serious setback. We're down to a new page with 1,000 people followers. So that's just politics. That's how that happens. But on the conference call this a couple of weeks ago, it was interesting. I'll tell you, I wasn't prepared to talk about modern monetary theory. It came up in the Q&A session. I didn't present that. I didn't go into that with any notes written down. So I was just winging it when that came up, and I'm glad you appreciated my answer because I wasn't sure if it was thorough enough. I wasn't sure if maybe I went into too much detail. But the main thing about this strategy is that it's transpartisan. So you have an anti-Democratic Party group like Movement for a People's Party that can endorse this. And then most of the people who have signed this contract so far are registered Democrats. They're running within the Democratic Party. This is a transpartisan strategy, this contract for American Renewal. I call it's of course, the contract for American Renewal has the acronym CFAR. And we all know that, my flight down to New Orleans, I was sitting next to a judge, an elected judge. And I asked her if this thing would hold up in court. And she said, absolutely not. She'd throw it right out. So I refer to this as the CFAR manifesto, right? And this it's disguised as a contract. But the whole approach, the CFAR or else, is militant. This is militant electoral strategy that's never been used before in American history, to my knowledge, to have voters stand up and say, I don't care what your platform is, Mr. and Mrs. Candidate. Here's my platform. Sign the dotted line, or we're not with you. We're not going to donate any money to you. We're not going to vote for you. We're not going to work for you unless you sign the dotted line. So the upshot, the final result of this might be in November for people living in 43 states is to actually write in a candidate. Either hopefully candidates will step forward and say, hey, in New York's 23rd district, I'm the write-in candidate for the CFAR movement, and that'll happen in 400 and some races around the country. That there will be, because there's no CFAR candidate on the ballot. We want people to step forward and say, I'm a CFAR candidate, write in my name. And we have the internet now, so that people don't have to run a multi-$1,000, much less multi-million-dollar campaign to serve the purpose of this militant alternative of writing in a protest vote. Nobody's going to get elected as a CFAR write-in candidate. But what we will do is help defeat the neoliberal Democrats. This is the second, as I explained on the conference call with the Draft Bernie folks, this is the second objective of this strategy. First objective, of course, is to get CFAR candidates elected. And we'll be asking the media wing of Real Progressives to generate some ads, right? So we can run online initially. You mentioned that we have a super PAC, and that might have raised some concerns among the viewers. Oh my God, why do a super PAC? They're the bad guys. During Bernie or Bust, we kept donations limited to $1,000 per person. We wanted to make it very clear it was a grassroots PAC. But now we've taken the gloves off. Our limit maximum donation over at Crowd PAC is $1 million. You might be thinking, whoa, that's not very grassroots. But we're supporting 20-some candidates, right? So $1 million divided among 20-some candidates isn't all that much money. It sounds like a lot, but by the time we put together the production for all these ads and book them on television and radio, it's going to divide up pretty slender. But we're taking the gloves off. We're going to function like a super PAC because we're a national organization, and we're supporting what could be 100, 200 candidates in the end. So there's that to consider. And of course, we'll take small donations too. All these will come together and form the electoral wing of the revolution that was sparked by Bernie Sanders. And I mentioned Sanders. I want to make one more point about him. In 2016, he was the candidate. He sparked this revolution, and Real Progressives got behind it. We got behind it as Bernie or Bust. Movement for Bernie got behind it. People for Bernie got behind it. He had a lot of grassroots organizing support, which is what a revolution is. A revolution isn't a campaign. A revolution comes from the grassroots. So this time around, it's strictly coming from the grassroots. I don't know of any national strategy that's revolutionary. This grassroots bottom-up strategy is the revolutionary strategy for the midterms. There's no other one out there. And it's militant because we're saying you either sign this contract or screw you. We'll just write in a protest vote. And very quickly, for the 7 states that don't have that write-in option, we're just going to trust the people who take this pledge to, vote wisely. We're not going to make any recommendations because we just can't. And for all the races that are out there, maybe there's a progressive Democrat running who didn't sign the contract, but he or she might be better than the Republican. That's going to be up to the people in those 7 states. But where there's the write-in option, we want people, if necessary, to take their finger and put their name on the contract across the monitor, right? So they personally sign that contract, go to the polling booth on November 6th, and write in their own name if there's no CFAR candidate on the ballot. And one thing we'll be doing is making sure we communicate to all CFAR pledged voters across the country is we'll have a table set up so they can go and see if there's a CFAR candidate in their district. And of course, vote for him or her if there is.
All right, Victor, I'm going to show a CFAR contract for Mr. Gallant himself, and I'm going to put this up on the screen. For those of you who can't read this, don't worry, I'm going to make it bigger. At least I hope so anyway. So let's just see if you can see that okay. And I'm just going to read what this says. It says that he will sponsor, co-sponsor, and vote in favor of legislation for all the following: raising the minimum wage to $15 per hour, initiating government investment over 5 years toward rebuilding our crumbling roads, bridges, railways, airports, public transit systems, ports, dams, wastewater plants, and other infrastructure needs, implementing bold measures to address climate change, cultivating through investment and tax incentives sustainable sources of energy as alternatives to fossil fuels, reforming tax regulations to discourage corporations from shifting their profits and jobs overseas to avoid paying U.S. income taxes, and enacting universal transaction tax on Wall Street trading to discourage reckless speculation, expanding Social Security, making no reductions in the existing benefits of Medicare, expand Medicare as part of a single-payer initiative to establish fully universal high-quality health care, and making tuition free at in-state public colleges, universities, trade, and tech schools throughout America. Should a person choose to attend a private university or out of state, no interest loans should be made available. And folks, I just want to say right now, this right here is a great, great, great plan. It is certainly populist. It shouldn't raise too many eyebrows in terms of, this should be relatively straightforward for people. And there were some modifications to that contract recently, just to make sure that we were all copacetic before we went ahead and embraced this. And I'm telling you right now, Victor, I'm excited. I know our team is excited. And I know that the people are excited to see, instead of everybody pulling their own separate ways, to start seeing groups pull together, develop strength, develop a credibility and moxie that it takes to tell people and work with people and show them how it's done. And we've just increased our power base significantly to make sure that this message is indeed heard around not only the country, but in my opinion, around the world. I want people to take notice of us, because our problems, even though we're focused largely electorally here in the United States, are all over the globe. And as you'll see Sunday night, we'll have Dr. Stephanie Kelton and Dr. Bill Mitchell join me. Bill Mitchell of Australia, Stephanie Kelton, obviously, of the Bernie Sanders Institute, or the Sanders Institute. And, we have a real opportunity here to change the course of history by taking steps like CFAR to get actual representation in Congress and the Senate that can actually deliver on the promise that we as progressives have been begging for and only given lip service by the establishment. Victor, what do you got to say to that, brother?
Well, that's right. I mean, this is the whole idea, is to empower the voter. It sounds bizarre, but a voter pledge does that without, creating a formal structure of some kind of voter union, which, a lot of people don't like unions anyway. It does create this unified voter sentiment that, hey, we want this to be the agenda of the next Congress. It's very, in that very narrow sense, it's revolutionary, right? The voters themselves are inverting the power relationship between candidate and the voters. Instead of voters saying, oh, well, here's candidate A, B, and C. I like the platform of candidate C. We don't care what the platform of these candidates are. We want them to sign on to our platform. Now, and I say our platform, I don't mean Revolt Against Plutocracy or Real Progressives platform. This comes from polling. This is a populist platform. It comes from public opinion. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to talk about, the contract itself over the last few months has changed, partly because of our merger here with Real Progressives. We've come to the realization we don't want to have tax increases anywhere in that contract, so they're all taken out. We just don't need them. And why fight against the Norquist pledge when you don't need to? Basically, bottom line. If someday, if you want to address inequality, and we have enough progressives in Congress that we can actually pass a tax increase on the uber rich, then for other reasons, not for economic reasons, but for perhaps moral reasons or resentment, to use a Nietzschean kind of term about attitudes toward the billionaire class. But that's way out in front of us, so we're not concerned about that at this point. And I just want to make two more points about platform planks on this, or policy positions in this contract. First, we were pushed by our spokesperson, Kelly Lane, to address election integrity. I mean, it still bugs us a lot how Bernie was robbed of that nomination. We saw it in, not statewide, but in county after county, in a good number of states, not just massive voter suppression from reduced hours and yanking them off the polls, but we saw these discrepancies between the exit polls and the actual results. Not on the Republican side, those are fine. Those would pass any integrity test anywhere in the world. But on the Democratic side, very often, and they were really around specific kinds of voting machines, we saw these huge discrepancies between the actual outcome, the report in the news, and the exit polls, which should never happen. That indicates voter fraud, not voter fraud, election fraud. So we brought it, it took us a long time to find the polls that allowed us to bring election integrity in. But we finally stumbled into one that 76% of voters, this is before DEF CON 2017, I can talk about that here in a second if you want, and all this Russians hacked our election nonsense that's in the news and scaring people for the last few months. Before that was a poll showing 76% of voters have little or no confidence that their vote is going to be counted correctly. That's it. That's all. That's the only poll. That's the poll we were looking for that said, all right, we can add this. We now know that it will be popular to have Congress mandate hand countable paper ballots, right? So they can be audited, and transparent audits, so we don't have sneaky things going on during recounts. So we want really election integrity. So that's a new on our most recent policy position that we've added. We keep it at 11. We don't want to keep adding more and more and more. We like 11. That's how the contract originally came to us from its founder. The CFAR is the brainchild of a novelist, American novelist, John Rachel. He brought it to us with 11 policy positions. We're keeping that, but not keeping the original 11 he provided, because originally the document kind of screamed white privilege. So we brought in criminal justice, which has a lot of support, to have a special independent prosecutor in the case of every use of lethal force by the police. We want special prosecutors brought in for that. And finally, we modified the Citizens United policy position recently. And I'm really thrilled. We don't have it up yet. It's on our Citizens Against Plutocracy Facebook page, not the group, but the page. Is Kelly's interview with Tim Canova. And I was listening to it this morning. She did it Thursday, but I haven't had access to it until she got it loaded onto that Citizens Against Plutocracy page. And I'm listening to Tim Canova actually refer to the very same thing we changed our contract to. Normally, people think about overturning Citizens United. It's where I'm coming from, or where I came from before Bernie or Bust, which was the move to amend movement, right? The idea of, well, we're going to need a constitutional convention to overturn the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision, McCutcheon decision, and going back to 1976, Buckley v. Vallejo, this whole idea that giving money is an act of speech protected by the First Amendment, and spending money is an act of speech protected by the First Amendment. If the framers had intended that to be the case, they would have put it in the First Amendment. So we think the Supreme Court has had this wrong, including the ACLU also has had this wrong since 1976. And the idea was we're going to need a constitutional amendment to overturn these Supreme Court decisions, as has happened in the past. However, there's been a group out there called Money Out of Politics working for years promoting this idea. Joe Firestone actually brought it up in the interview he held with Kelly Lane. What about using the exclusion clause of Article 3, Section 2? And I'll be damned, I don't know, maybe Tim Canova's had a look at our most recent contract for him, because the one he signed was back in August last year. We had the old-fashioned amendment approach, and he talked about that in the interview with Kelly. And then he said, or we'll just pass legislation and invoke the exclusion clause. It's the nuclear option, he called it. But my ears just popped out of my head, because I couldn't believe he was actually talking about the very same thing we just did to modify this CFAR in order to speed up the whole process of getting big money, corporate money, and union money out of our elections, and make elections a struggle among the people. That's what democracy means. It doesn't mean it'll be the end of left versus right or a divided America. It just means instead of being divided between the left-wing progressive, or progressive is the wrong word, liberal billionaires and the right-wing Tea Party billionaires, it'll be divided amongst we the people. right? So our contributions of $20, $30 per person for a candidate or for a party or for a political action committee will actually be equal to those contributions of the billionaires once we have comprehensive campaign finance reform that equalizes and democratizes the American electoral system and outlaws oligarchy and plutocracy. That is Revolt Against Plutocracy's key primary aim, and the reason we have that overturning Citizens United policy position in the contract.
All right, buddy, freaking-tastic. So let me ask you the next phase here, right? As we go forward and people want to volunteer to assist with pitching in to really, really help push the CFAR pledge and make sure that the candidates in their local communities are held accountable or at least advance with this, what can our followers, what can our viewers do to be a part of this? How can they get involved, Victor?
Appreciate that question. So the CFAR strategy has three primary components. First is the candidates, right? So people who want to volunteer and get involved in this can go to CFAR movement, CFAR movement.us, as in United States, CFAR movement.us. There's a place on that website where they can sign up to get involved, right? And leave your contact information and we'll get a hold of you. So what we want our volunteers to do, any number of the following. One, recruit candidates. We have tutorials on our tutorial tab that tells people how to recruit candidates. We have a Tuesday night conference call, video conference call. You can turn your camera off if your hair is all messed up, you don't want to be seen, but you can still listen and participate in that cause. And that will be, we can talk about best practices. We can talk about things that you should do when you talk to a candidate, things you should not do when you talk to a candidate, how to approach a candidate over time. Because first we say, please, here's what we can bring to your campaign. And if they say no, we follow up with, okay, we'll be working against you. We'll ask your opponent. All right, so there's a strategy or a series of tactical maneuvers in the process of asking a candidate to sign the contract. All right, and this is in our tutorial and on our Tuesday night conference calls. That's one activity we would like CFAR activists to participate in. The second is to have voters sign this pledge. That's what Burn Your Bus was. It was a massive voter pledge of nearly 100,000. I found out there was a lot of duplicates in that 100,000, so it's more like 65, 70,000 voters who took the Burn Your Bus pledge. But that was done because 150 or so volunteers that we recruited went around the internet. They didn't go around the country offline, but they went around the internet and they posted links to our website encouraging people to take the Burn Your Bus pledge. So that's part of it. We want people actively recruiting voters to take the CFAR voter pledge. And then I found out this week, we have an account set up at CrowdPAC with Citizens Against Plutocracy PAC. And what I found out this week is, so we have our campaign laid out there, but anyone who supports any one of the CFAR candidates can go out there and set up their own CrowdPAC campaign using our PAC to collect the money. And then when we see, because you'll have your own totals, let's say it comes out $15,000 that you for candidate X acquired, got donations to support candidate X, we'll be able to see that $15,000 totaled up. We'll generate ads for candidate X, and we'll spend that $15,000 on your candidate in your congressional district, in the major markets of your congressional district, and try to help your candidate win his or her primary. Or if it goes into November, we'll help them try to win in November, around this idea of only one candidate has signed a binding commitment to the voters, and that's candidate X. Vote candidate X, or else in the next Congress, you're going to get screwed. Only candidate X supports your agenda. Something like that. I mean, I'm just winging it, but that's one of the things we need to work with your organization on, is to generate a script for these ads. And it's not something you can just turn around and snap your fingers and come up with in 5 minutes. There's actually this long form we filled out during the burn your bus phase, a series of Q&As for ourselves. You know, what are we trying to accomplish? What emotions are we playing on? Fear, right? You either go CFAR or the Republican's going to get elected, and so forth. But it's something that we have to craft and put together, you know, the video, audio, synchronization, and come up with 30-second spots so we can help these candidates win their primaries and win in the general election.
Absolutely. So, Victor, one of the things that you had talked about with Joe Firestone was his overt congressional financing, which was a very, very small paragraph, if you will, or two of legislative language that would be inserted into every bill, etc. He's very excited about that. He's been pushing the RP Letters campaign, where they're trying to get people to understand the pledge. This is another thing it's not a pledge, but it's like a pledge, right? So it's like a complementary action that will force Congress to acknowledge that the debt is really irrelevant and that we can pay for anything we want. And to make sure that they understand it, we will make sure that the Fed is always dumping the money into the Treasury's account to pay for every bill, so there is no concern with the debt, pays down the debt, whatever. So my question to you is that as we go forward, are you ready for some real hardcore blending and merging and making shit happen? Because here's the deal. We're looking at it. We have progressive champions that we interview constantly, and they are vetted by folks like the Justice Democrats and brand new Congress and those folks, but they're not asking the questions that I care about. I mean, when I see some of these candidates that are quote unquote sponsored by them, a lot of these people are just like, yeah, they said they're progressive. Check. There you go. That's good enough for me. And I'm like, sometimes we're going, oh my goodness, what did that person just say? We can't support them. Listen to them. And so by adding the CFAR pledge with some education from real progressives for those candidates to learn the economic system, just basics, so that they are able to go to battle equipped to deliver this nice, robust package. When you put all that together and then you start interviewing folks and you start putting all the piecemeal together, we are going to be unstoppable. I mean, I can't see anything to get in our way. I think the
Koch brothers have about $400 million they're going to attempt to put in our way.
So I guess we need 400 million, huh?
Yeah, if we know a billionaire willing to part with that much money, sure. I mean, the idea here, part of this struggle is money versus ideas, money versus populist support. I mean, that's what Bernie showed, that, you know, the good ideas and populist support could actually win if he hadn't been robbed by the Clinton-cratic machine. Let me just address the relationship between CFAR candidates and modern monetary theory. There's nothing in the CFAR that compels the candidates to run and campaign on modern monetary theory. It's going to be the job of real progressives to follow up on our interviews with them. One of our questions that we ask these candidates, because once we get a contract signed, we follow it up with an interview. And we have a standard question. You're just a tax and spend liberal, aren't you? All right. And so hopefully they're saying, oh, no, I'm not a liberal, I'm a progressive. And hopefully they come back with, well, no, we don't have to raise taxes at all. We can do all the spending without raising taxes, you know, to provide the modern monetary theory answer, which doesn't happen. So there's a lot of education that needs to follow up from your folks. And one thing I've suggested is a tutorial maybe between your best MMT guy, Tim Canova, who understands modern monetary theory, and then a couple of CFAR candidates who don't understand modern monetary theory. Part of this Zoom meeting that can be recorded, and then we can turn that into a YouTube video so that we can present this, the how do you campaign on modern monetary theory? Because you just said something a little while ago, the deficits don't matter. And I was thinking, boy, if I had heard that 2.5 years ago, I would have thought you were out of your mind, right? It sounds insane when you're stuck in the obsolete thinking of gold standard framework. To hear somebody talk about the economy from the perspective of modern monetary theory, it sounds nuts. And that's the hard part of the theories. The theory is not hard to understand. It's just a number of realities that change the relationship between the federal budget and the economy. But the hard part is forgetting all this nonsense that we've been embedded with and infused with over the decades. That's all still coming out of the gold standard. I'll refer to, I don't know the exact quote, but Eisenhower was certainly, gold standard kind of politician, president, who talked about every warship built, every gun produced represents in the end a theft from a child who needs to be fed. That's gold standard thinking, because it doesn't anymore. We can have guns and butter too. It's not a trade-off. But back to the relationship between the contract and the candidates.
Yes.
They're not signing on. When they sign the CFAR, they're not signing on to MMT. So we will follow up. We will present them based on their answer to my question. You're just a tax and spend liberal, with an opportunity to learn MMT. And hopefully we can do it through a video tutorial, so we don't have to keep making the same presentation over and over and over again. We do it once, we record it, turn it into a YouTube video, and ask them to watch this half-hour presentation so that they can A, learn MMT in the first half of this thing, and B, learn how to campaign on MMT. That's why I think Tim Cano will be an important participant in this tutorial, because he is, he knows this stuff pretty well, and he is campaigning against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So he's somebody I think a lot of candidates can look up to and go, oh, well, if Canova can make this case against the former chair of the DNC, then I can make my case against this Republican schmuck here in my district.
That's right. So as we go through the list of progressive champions, we're going to have an opportunity to present the CFAR pledge to them. That's the goal, to be able to take this group, merge with this group, bring it to this group, and go ahead and push forward candidates that actually mean business and actually want to deliver a progressive agenda, this populist agenda that is truly progressive. And
it separates the neoliberals from the progressives. You just said, how do you determine who's progressives? That's why when the CFAR came along, I immediately glommed onto it, because I had been struggling when I'm thinking about how the hell are we going to do progressive or bust for the midterms? How do you determine who's progressive? How do you know if it's a candidate who's just getting started? How do you know if he or she is progressive? You can look at their website and look at their platform, but they're just words. Platforms are words. How do you actually know if somebody's progressive? Remember, Hillary Clinton said during the primaries, I'm a progressive, over and over and over again. I'm a progressive, which was, of course, complete nonsense. We all knew that. But she was able to get away with it because, she kept repeating the big lie, because I think Joseph Goebbels popped out of his grave and joined her campaign as a consultant, but that's just my own fantasy. The CFAR ends that, right? If a candidate is willing to sign this kind of commitment, we don't call it a pledge because pledges are relatively weak. This is a binding commitment. And maybe it's not legally binding, but it's morally binding to the voters, right? This is what I'm going to do when I'm in Washington. And if I don't do this, if I actually badmouth minimum wage or whatever, I don't work hard enough on it, you can hold me, take me to account. You talked about going to town hall meetings. These candidates who get elected under the CFAR agreement are going to be held accountable. They're either going to do what they've signed on to doing, or they're going to hear it in town hall meetings. There'll be people there handing out flyers. Hey, he signed a contract or she signed a contract committing them to do this, this, and this. And look what they're doing. Nothing. They're not supporting this bill. We can hold them accountable in ways that in ways that you just can't now without the CFAR.
So what I want to do, Victor, is open the floor up for anyone that may or may not have questions about what they see. If somebody has a specific question about how they can get involved or or maybe they've heard something today that maybe they haven't wrapped their brain around. I want to give everybody a real opportunity here to be a part of this, because that's what this is. This is a we campaign. This is a us movement. And without everyone's participation, it's just a couple dudes talking to some computer cameras and getting nowhere and nowhere fast. We need your help. So talk to us. Do you have any questions? If you do, we'll bring them up on the screen, and Victor and I will take every opportunity we can to answer them.
Maybe while we're waiting for the questions to come up, I'll just quickly again talk about the three components. There are CFAR candidates, CFAR voters pledged to support CFAR candidates, and CFAR activists. Right, those are the three parts, and that's what we need: are activists to recruit candidates and voters. So it's Bernie or bust in a more involved way, because we didn't have to recruit Bernie. He just came out there and sparked this revolution. Now we need to actually recruit the more revolutionary candidates, the progressive candidates.
Okay. Well, Victor, we are not seeing any questions, and it could just be a function of the way Facebook is, or people maybe don't really know what to ask at this point, but that's okay. We're not going anywhere. We'll be available. You can ask us questions whenever you want.
That's because I've explained things so well.
Well, you know what I was going to say? Victor is so damn thorough. Victor is so thorough. All right. Well, look, without further ado, Victor, I'm excited to work with you and your team. You guys are great. We really took some time to talk through the issues. You guys understand our bigger picture. You guys, this is going to be exciting. If we can use this CFAR pledge as our maiden voyage, if you will, on how this works, we can start getting some lessons learned on more and more and more opportunities to pull the community in and really truly make a difference, and really make it so that when we say stuff, people really have no choice but to listen, because it won't be our voice. It'll be all these voices with us. I think it's an amazing opportunity.
It is. It is. We have more of an alliance set up now than we had with Bernie or bust. The only alliance we had with Bernie or bust. Of course, at the time, I had no idea who Real Progressives was. We would have come to you for a formal alliance if I had known who you were. But you kind of popped out of the ether from nowhere, and I wasn't sure even who you were. But so we have much greater alliance now than we had with Bernie or bust, which has got to be helpful.
That's great. All right. So, Victor, I'm not going to keep us here any longer. Folks, I'm begging you tonight, please tune in for Joe Firestone at 8 p.m. There'll be another video with Joy Mann. Savage Joy will be coming up at 9:15, I believe it is, after Joe. And then tomorrow night, you will have me living what is only possible a dream come true, to have Australian guru, original MMTer Bill Mitchell, and the elusive yet ever-present Stephanie Kelton joining us. I'm like, so I've been like nonstop thinking about this around the clock, because I mean, it's one thing to have one of them on the show at any time. You're like, oh my God, I hope I don't screw this up. But to have both of them on at the same time, I just can't. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing it. And before we go, let me just make a point about these three components. They each have their own URL, right? So I already gave the CFARmovement.us. That's where activists can go, and it's a turnkey revolution page. You can just go and read and learn how to do this. There's no Q&A necessary, although on the About Us page there are comments which I can pick up and get back to you on. There's also the CFAR voter pledge, the CFARvoter.us. That's where you send voters. You can also set up your own local sign-up list. There's a tutorial that explains how to do that on the tutorial page. And finally, there's a CFAR candidate, CFAR 2018. That's where you send the candidates, CFAR2018.us. All right, so we have three components, three URLs to cover each of these components. And it's turnkey, baby. Just plug in, turn the key, and get this engine started. Let's have a revolution in the United States.
All right, sir. All right, without further ado, I am going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and close this off. I want to thank you, partner. We'll be doing many more of these. Look forward to getting our candidates out there. Look forward to recruiting more. and look forward to winning some real progressive change in America. So, Victor, thank you, sir. I appreciate it once again.
Thank you, and I'm looking forward to it as well.
All right, folks, thank you very much. We will talk to you soon. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.